The level of the athletes we're working with today, they've all been Welsh or English schools level, and they're all top 15 in their age group on the Power of 10. Eldest is Sophie, who's 23, and the youngest is Grace, who's 17, and then Dan and Lauren are in the middle of that. So the session today is a hurdles rhythm session. So for us, that's anything over 4 hurdle clearances, probably up to something around about 6 hurdle clearances at this time of year, which would be late October going into November. There's not a big focus on their start to the first hurdle, although that is something we've been working on, so there'll be a few markers and things out just to keep that progression going. But my main focus will be from hurdle 4 onwards. So with the session being focused on the rhythm of the race, there is an emphasis where there'll be some fatigue in the runs. So whilst the athletes will be running under fatigue, I don't want to induce too much fatigue, so recoveries will be set quite generously. The girls are going to aim to do 2 sets of 3 runs with a good 10 minutes between the 2 sets, and probably something around 3 minutes between the reps. Dan's slightly different in that he's going to do 5 or 6 runs, but we'll do them as a series, and I'll let him manage his own recovery, and I'll just keep an eye on the clock and make sure he's not probably pushing it beyond kind of the 4 or 5 minutes between each run. The main drill in our warm-up, aside from the general movements of forwards, backwards, sideways and crossing over, was the walking A, which is an opportunity for me to review the athlete's posture and also to give them an opportunity to hit some key positions. So the aim with the walking A is to hit this box shape where the knee is lifted to parallel and the toe is behind the knee, so we're not overstepping. So it emphasises therefore small steps. The second time round, I'm really focused on looking at the athlete from the front and the back and having an opportunity to get them to stretch to the ceiling and just observe whether they're hitching and lifting their hips whilst they maintain control in their pelvis. The warm-up's designed to fit in a series of warm-ups across the week, so looking at it in isolation can sometimes look a little bit odd, but the main premise of the warm-up was for me to be able to assess and see where we're at this point in the week. So the first exercise is jogging forwards, skipping backwards. They're just general locomotive exercises to get the heart rate going, just to get some movement. Punctuated in those then are a series of walking tasks where I then get to have a good look at the athletes. The athletes get to then flag up anything that feels different, unusual from the previous sessions, etc. And it gives me a chance to assess that postural alignment. So they were our walking A's, which we then went back into another jogging series, forwards and backwards. And sidestepping, again, comes in general locomotion. keen in the warm-up to expose athletes to some different movement patterns. Everything we're going to do around the hurdling especially is going to be very linear and in one direction. So if I can emphasise some sideways movements or some twisting movements, then I try and get that in the warm-up. And then we go back into the walking A's again. Again, it's a postural assessment. I'm not necessarily using it as a technical drill, although we are hitting some of those key shapes and key positions. And then again, we finish with some general movements, which was some sidestepping, and then this time take it into some twisting movement with a high crisscross step over. The second section of the warm-up is very much an individualised element, roughly aiming for it to be around about 5 minutes. Now the athletes I'm working with, I've worked with for a minimum of one whole season, so they're quite well versed in what they need to do and when they need to do it, so it does become very specific. But generally we're trying to hit some specific stretching for the hurdling sessions, and then we're trying to hit some specific activations or maybe some little prehab routines. So that could be feet, like Lauren was doing with the tennis balls. It can be around the hip and the glutes like Sophie and Grace were doing with their bands. Sophie was doing it as a monster walk and Grace was doing it quite static, but with some challenge in terms of how she's having to move in multiple planes all at once. And as you could see, Dan was persevering with his flexibility work because that's something we're trying to develop in terms of that range of movements. The first exercise was our high knee pull into a lunge, which is the challenge of then controlling the lunge and coming back out into a high knee pull. A quad stretch, balanced into a Superman pose. And the athlete then repeats the A to go into a quad stretch and a further Superman pose. And our final exercise was a reverse lunge with a single rotation and then resetting in the middle, pushing off into another lunge, rotating and resetting in the middle. So then the third part of the warm-up progression was the dynamic mobility. This is an opportunity for me to chain some exercises together, again hit some ranges of motion, but then also to challenge them with some postural control. So the lunge into a high knee pull develops their mobility, but also their ability to balance and change and move shapes and manage their centre of gravity, which is something that they're going to be experiencing then in their hurdle session again. The final section of our warm-up then was a throws opportunity. Now this serves two purposes for the group. Two of the athletes are heptathletes, so this becomes a key component to them actually working on their shot put. It's a nice opportunity to get some extra throwing in without it being a full session. And then for the hurdlers, it becomes again a further opportunity for them to express force and to experience some different movement patterns. Also find it's a good way of then finishing your warm-up and taking that level of intensity up and linking it back into then when we put our spikes on and do something more explosive and fast with the hurdles.